All right, welcome back. We're continuing from where we left off last time, talking about Maven plugins last time. So at this point, we've got our plugins pretty much set up how we want. We are able to run compile successfully, build success down here, and everything's looking good. Let me check my git status. So I do have the POM as it looks right now, and I've modified git ignore to include or to ignore our target directory. I'll go ahead and add both of those with git add dot meaning this directory, so it added all the changed files. And then I'll go ahead and commit this change with a message of added plugins to POM, ignoring target error. And I'll go ahead and push that change up to GitHub, to branch main, which is the branch that I'm currently on. By the way, I'm using the Z shell, and I have the Git, what module is it called? .zshrc. So here's my Z shell RC. It's almost completely unmodified. I do have omyzsh in here to manage my plugins. So I do have Git plugin and the VI mode plugin. But other than that, I think the only thing I've added is this adding Java to my path. And I've got these aliases down here that we're probably not going to use in the near term. So yeah, that's why I see Git here and the branch from that Git plugin. So we just push everything up, so now we're ready to move on. Now we have one POM. It's just like the top level POM that defines our project build stuff. But most enterprise Java projects are multi-module, which means like they're not just a single Maven module. There's a top level module and then child modules, and then you break your source code up into different groups, or each of those different modules that you define. So we're going to do that here as well. Now, right now, this project, we didn't actually specify any kind of packaging. So by default, when we were doing Maven clean install, it was building jar files for us, which is the default type of packaging. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is update the packaging here to be POM. So we're not going to build a jar. We're going to treat this as just a POM. So it basically has no type of artifact being generated. Just the POM itself is the artifact for this particular project. And then what we're going to do is add modules. For example, we'll add a tutorial API-server module, and it's giving me this red underline because that module doesn't actually exist, but I'll create it here in a second. What I typically do for my modules is prefix each module with the parent artifact ID, so that way it's more clear when I'm doing builds where the source code for that module is coming from. So in this case, I'll go ahead and create a new. Now, I can create a module, or I can just create a directory. It's effectively the same thing. So in this case, I already defined the module here, so I'll just do a directory, and we'll call it tutorial API server, just like we defined here. And then we'll go ahead and create. Now, it's still underlined in red because there's no POM in there. So I'll go ahead and create a new pom.xml file. I'm going to split this one down to the bottom and show this one up at the top. And I'm going to copy this first part a little bit and put this project down here. Okay, so we're pretty similar to where we were when we first started the project with this top level POM. Now that I have a POM down here, this red underline went away, so it recognized that this POM now exists. Now, since this POM is a child module POM, I need to tweak it a little bit. So I need to tell it what its parent is with the parent tag. And I'm going to move these 3 lines up inside there. So now the parent artifact, group ID and artifact and version all line up with the POM that's in the top level directory, which is this POM up here. So you can see that these 3 lines here exactly match with these 3 lines here. So we're basically telling this child POM that your parent is this POM, and Maven will know how to actually find that POM, and by default it's one directory up. You can specify relative paths to it, but in this case we don't need it, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it out. Now for this child module, we do want it to be a jar, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to, packaging to jar. And jar is the default, which technically means I don't actually need this line at all, since jar is default. So in fact, I can go ahead and delete it. Now, I have group ID, artifact ID, and version for my parent. I don't have those for this child POM, so I'm going to go ahead and define those. Now, when you specify a parent section in your POM, you don't actually need to specify things that are the same, right? So in this case, the group ID is the same as the parent, and I'm going to leave it the same, which means, and that's what it's warning about here, that means this definition is redundant. If it's going to be the same, then you don't need to specify it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete group ID and version, because the version of this child POM will always have the same version as the parent POM. So I'll go ahead and delete that version line as well. Now the artifact ID is going to be different. This is going to be tutorial API-server. So I mentioned this earlier, like the reason I named this directory or this module tutorial API server is because I want it to line up with the name of the artifact ID of the POM that I'm going to put in that directory. So they don't have to line up, meaning I could call this directory something else. I could just call it server, for example, and even server with a capital S. So I can call it whatever, and then I'd name this module server with a capital S, and then I could have tutorial API server here. So it wouldn't line up, but that just adds confusion. So it's best to make kind of everything the same there, which is what I'm doing here. All right, so I saw my warnings and everything disappear. So other than this green spell check warning, which I could probably add that save tutorial API to dictionary, so now it's not going to complain about that spelling any longer. So now everything looks good. If I come back over here, rerun my Maven clean install command, it now sees 2 different things that it needs to run. So tutorial API, which is the top level POM, and it has a packaging of type POM, right, which we can see here on line 7. And then tutorial API server, which has a packaging of type jar, which I deleted the packaging line because jar is the default, and we do want it to build a jar. So that's why we don't actually have a packaging line here, but Maven knows what to do with it. So now you can see these different sections. So it first built the tutorial API, which is the top level project, and that's kind of build 1 of 2. And then after it finished invoking the plugins associated with that top level POM, then it went to the child modules, right, which there's only 1, so tutorial API server, and it ran the build for there as well. So all of this looks the same. With a POM, there are less things to do. So with a POM, there isn't anything to compile, so you don't see any compiler plugin things, even though we are defining compiler plugin in our list of plugins to run. Maven knows that in a POM you're not generating any artifacts, so it doesn't make sense to attempt to compile anything because you're not building any artifacts. There's not going to be nothing to compile. And it picked up, our server built everything just fine, which is still empty because we haven't actually created any source code for it. So we started with a single module basically in our Maven build. Now we have multiple modules. Well, kind of multiple. We have a parent and then we have a single child. To have multiple in real life, or if for real, we'll have multiple. I'll go ahead and create another module. We'll call this one REST. So basically the server is going to be an embedded Jetty server, and then we're going to have all of our REST endpoints inside this REST module. And so our server, once we stand it up, will basically include this REST module as a dependency so that it can access those REST endpoints. So I just defined this module here. I'll go ahead and create a new directory up here. We'll call it tutorial API REST so that it lines up with the POM inside of it. I'm actually going to copy the POM from tutorial API server and paste it in there, and then change server to REST. So this POM is nearly identical to the POM for the server at this point, and we'll make them different at some point in the future. So now if I run the build, I can see it's picking up both the REST and the server and the parent POM, so everything is building like normal. All the plugins are running for REST, just like all the plugins are running for server, because they're both jar modules, or they're both packaged as jars. All right, so now one thing about IntelliJ, so it has this little blue box next to tutorial API, but it doesn't have that box next to our sub-modules. So if I go ahead and right-click on that and choose Maven, Reload Project, it now recognizes both of those as Maven modules, and it added the little blue symbol next to it. So not sure why it doesn't do that automatically, but with a quick Maven reload, then it went ahead and recognized those changes, and now it's good to go. Now something about these child POMs, tutorial API server, and tutorial API REST. Like, we're not specifying any plugin configuration or anything inside those child modules, and that's because we did all of our plugin definitions up at this top level. So we told it what plugins to run for every module, and then we told it when running those plugins, these are the configurations that you should use, which most of them are just using the default configuration, but we're at least telling them what version explicitly to use. And for the compiler case, we're giving it additional information about how to do the compilation a little bit more strictly than usual. And we're defining an execution for the failsafe plugin to make sure that it actually runs as well. So all the child POMs inherit the configuration from their parent POMs, which are obviously defined in this parent section. So yeah, now we're officially a multi-module Maven project. We're still building just fine with no errors. Just this one warning about not actually having code to compile. So let's go ahead and get status, git add, do git status again to make sure what we've added is okay. Now I see these .iml files are IntelliJ files. So because these are IntelliJ generated, we don't actually want to include those in what we push into our GitHub. So I'm going to copy paste this git restore staged line to unstage both of these IML files. Now if I do a git status, I see that these are red, meaning they're not tracked, and then the POMs that I've modified and added are the only things that are going to get tracked. Now what I want to do is make sure that we ignore all these .iml files in the future. So I'm going to update git ignore and add star.iml into the list here. Now if I do git status, those IML files disappeared. They're no longer part of what Git wants to track, and they're being ignored. So I'll do a git add on this git ignore file. Turned project into a multi-module Maven, and push it on up. So with that push, I can come over here to our tutorial API and hit refresh, and I see all of our changes from 10 seconds 0. So we've got our 2 child modules. They have the expected palms in there, and everything's looking good. So we'll continue on next time and start talking about code and some dependencies. That's it for now. Thank you.